Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's my great pleasure to welcome you here for this first roundtable dedicated to fashion in the ocean. My name is Nadège Massé. I'm the Communication Director of the Prince Albert II of Monaco Foundation. Today, during 1 hour, we will deep dive into fashion industry, explore its impact on our ocean and communities, but also what would be the solution for shifts within the industry. While knowing better the dark side of our closets, we will also question our relation to garments and fashion. Before welcoming our three inspiring ladies, I would like to invite our man of the day to join me on stage, Mr. Olivier Van Den, Vice President and CEO of the Prince Albert II of Monaco Foundation.
Thank you, Nadège. Good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for joining us in this premiere. It's the first time that we add fashion to the Ocean Week. And we felt with Nadège that it was very important to also add that crucial topic, since the fashion industry is probably, if not the most polluting industry in the world, at least one of the most polluting ones, with transportation, agriculture, and transport. So we're very pleased that you accepted to be part of that first experience. The Ocean Week is indeed an important event for Monaco, but also for those who accept to defend the ocean. And it is a place for debate on ocean protection, bringing together an extremely wide range of actors, personalities, of skills, and also sectors. And you are the proof of that today. Let me remind you quickly that the ocean plays a decisive role in the balance of our planet. So first and foremost, a climate balance. Just one figure today, the ocean is the best carbon sink we have available, with the capacity to absorb up to 30% of the green gas emission from human activities. But the ocean is also a balance in terms of biodiversity. 97% of the world's biodiversity is at sea. 97%, out of which we know very little, since 90% of the ocean floor is totally unknown to science. And the last balance I would like to mention is also the social balance. The social balance, because the blue economy today represents already 3% of the world's GDP, and 40 million people are directly working on the blue economy, with an expected 12 million more by 2030, at the end of this decade. So I don't need to tell you how fragile these balances are today due to a triple crisis: the climate crisis, the biodiversity crisis, and the pollution crisis. But I would like to tell you that we are all directly responsible for this fragility through our activities, our traveling, and our lifestyle choices. And again, the fashion industry has a severe influence, a severe impact on our environment and the ocean in particular. And that's the reason why we're here today. Because again, thanks to you ladies, we will discuss the solutions that exist. And the first, of course, will be the fight against the excess of fast fashion. And even, I discovered that this week, the ultra fast fashion. So I guess it would be garments that you wear, 24 hours or 48 hours and then you throw them away? Even fast fashion, I don't get the concept, so imagine ultra fast fashion. The second will be to encourage the use of more sustainable materials and more ethical and socially responsible manufacturing. And there's a big trend, at least in our Western world country, to support that. But of course, the costs have to remain affordable for a lot of customers. But the last point we will discuss today is crucial to me, is about greenwashing. Because as a customer, we are very often ready to pay a premium if it is proven to have a positive impact on the environment, if it is proven that there is a social advantage. But we are quite skeptical sometimes on certain labels, certain certification, because once again, what is core in every industry is the money, the margin. So I assume that a lot of companies are tempted to oversell their products using these greenwashing arguments. So behind all this, there is also a collective need to question our models, of course, our priorities and our values. And I would like to also mention another project that the foundation put together, thanks to Nadège, but also Céline and the complicity of all the team. It's a Green Shift Festival because we understood that maybe one key we miss in our transition, one key the world misses to put together the action plan that is needed, is probably the lack of dreaming the world we want, the lack of capacity to project ourselves in the world, 2050 or the next century, in a world where the transition would be completed, in a world where there will be food for everyone, that renewable energy will be the source or the main source of the energy we require. We don't have that. And the movie industry, theater, documentaries, even the books we read, the only future and the hope that is put on the table is a future on Mars, for instance. So even unconsciously, we can't project ourselves on planet Earth, which had been a success. So we launched the Green Shift Festival precisely to bring together artists, philosophers, but also doers in general from the private sector that would propose another way to understand and prepare ourselves for the future we want. I believe today the customers are increasingly demanding meaning and responsibility as well, and this is a good reason for hope, and that's what today's discussions will be all about. So once again, ladies, thank you so much for joining us for this opening workshop on the fashion industry and the connection with the ocean. I wish you all very good debates and a fantastic end of the Ocean Week 2024. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Olivier. I would like now to invite on stage our three experts of the day. So Mrs. Runa R, designer and activist. Mrs. Marisa Selfa, CEO of Tailored by Oceanborn, and Georgia Ray, Sustainability Strategy Director for EcoAge. So let me thank you first for accepting to participate in these discussions today. And before we start the conversation, may I ask you to introduce yourself briefly, please? Marisa, yeah.
Hello, I'm not sure this is working. Yeah, now it is. Hi, my name is Marisa Selfa. I'm the CEO of Tailored by Oceanborn and Oceanborn Lifestyle, part of the Oceanborn Foundation, a company that started a couple of years ago and that is 100% donating all the profits from all the businesses to the ocean.
Runa?
Hello. Before I start, I would really like to thank the foundation, Nadej, Olivier, the Highness himself, Celine, Leah, and everybody who's been a part of putting this roundtable together. So thank you so much. I would like to thank my wonderful panelists because I got to learn a lot from them. And of course, everybody here who's made time to come and be a part of this discussion. I'm Runa R, I'm a fashion environmentalist, and I work with finding solutions in design and circularity and trying to connect humanity with its environment. And hopefully we will discuss a lot more as we go further on, but that's all from me for now.
Kia ora koutou. My name is Georgia Ray, Sustainability Strategy Director at EcoAge. I have a funny accent because I'm from New Zealand, but I'm based at the moment in London. So I'm really delighted to be here in beautiful Monaco. I haven't seen the sun in London for a few months, so this is beautiful. EcoAge is an integrated sustainability and communications agency. So we help businesses kind of prepare, hold their hands along this sustainability journey, and I look after kind of that hand-holding. I come from consulting, where I work with banks and energy companies, and prior to that in marketing. So this is what we do, as a kind of amalgamation of those things, because businesses, as we'll talk about today, need to be prepared, need to be helped along this journey because the road ahead is really long. So I'm really excited to be here and share what we're doing. I think, we had dinner last night and it was a lot of fun, so I'm hoping we can bring that fun and that energy to the ending of the festival today.
Thank you. So I think it's important to start to remind why we are here today advocating for a green shift within the industry. Because if we have all in mind that the fashion industry is a hard polluter, sometimes we forget how much it impacts the planet. So ladies, if you had 2 facts to share with us about the reality of the impact of fashion, what would they be? Marisa?
Well, I'll start saying that fashion has a really bad reputation. You know, we just heard how polluting it is, but it's a wonderful industry, and I think it's just the way that we use it and how we can evolve. For me, if I have to pick 2 of the important data, the first one will be the very, very high intensive resource that the fashion industry needs on water, energy, and natural resources with the raw materials. I don't know you have in mind, and you know that a basic t-shirt, a basic cotton t-shirt that we all have plenty in our wardrobe, that actually consumes an average of 2,700 liters of water. 2,700. That is really the water that one person drinks for 3.5 years. If we really put perspective on this, and we know there's going to be water scarcity in the world, already there is, we really need to think about how many t-shirts do we want to buy, how many of those cheap t-shirts. We'll talk about the cheap t-shirt later, but I think it's important to know. So that's one. The other one is the carbon emissions. So the fashion industry is responsible for up to 10% of the global carbon emissions in the world. If we put perspective on that, that's the whole airplanes and maritime travel put together. So it is a huge impact.
Runa?
Thank you, Nadej. Very important question. I can answer this question from personal experience. So as a fashion environmentalist, I try to travel to the source. And that's very important for me as to where I get my fiber from. So last year, I decided to work with cotton farmers. And that's when I realized how intensive the process was, not just when it came to water during the processing, when it went into the garment industry, but also how important it was when it came to the prediction of timely rains, which was connected to, like, the farmers' suicides. And that got me to wonder, because when I spoke to these guys, they were kind of moving away from creating fodder for their cattle and even crops for their own consumption because they wanted to grow cotton. That's when I realized that fashion was actually competing with the food that we eat. And it was taking over land, resources, water, and making it extremely difficult, where people were giving up what they could eat for making money, where there was no surety about. The second thing, working in the garment industry, I see that even though you've got like 75 million, I try to keep away from numbers, but that's the quote that has been given by the United Nations Development Fund. And out of the 75 million people who are employed globally, worldwide, 75% get to be women. And these women are not paid right. There's a lot of problems when it comes to labor. There's a lot of child labor that's involved. And since the garment industry is so fragmented, it is very difficult to pinpoint where the source of problem could really arise. So, I mean, to kind of put it across these 2 points, one would be fashion is competing with food, and the second thing is when it comes to 75% of the workers still being in poverty.
Thank you. Georgia?
I'm going to talk about specifically an impact on the ocean. So I know you've had a microplastic conversation earlier in the week, but the fashion impact on microplastics within the ocean is terrible. We don't want to get too much into the negative, but basically from 2016 back to 1950, they are estimating that 5.8 million tons of microfibers and microplastics from synthetic fibers, with those being the raw material of fossil fashion, were entered into the ocean. You can't take them out. If there's a plastic bottle bobbing around in the ocean, we can grab that and try and get rid of that. The microfibers from synthetic fabrics cannot be taken out. And if there's 5.6 million tons of it going into our ocean, that is terrifying. And just last week or the week before, there was a test and a study done on the impact of microplastics in our kind of arteries and the impact on cardiovascular health. And the results were saying that, lo and behold, it does have a terrible impact, and heart disease, heart attacks, strokes are going to be increased. So we can link now fashion to human health, which is terrifying. And the last point I'll make before we get into some of the positives is around modern slavery within the fashion industry. Again, just last week, the EU released some kind of studies on the amount of money that is kind of churning through forced labor, and it's in the trillions. Criminals are making trillions of euros from forced labor, and a lot of that is through manufacturing, and a lot of that is through the fashion industry. So you've got people in the ultra-fast fashion brands working 75-hour weeks in rooms with no, sun like this, no proper adequate kind of bathroom breaks. They're creating clothes which are made of fossil fuels, which are then sold for a euro or a pound and then thrown away. It's pretty scary, the impact on human health and humans in the manufacturing supply chain.
So that's really red lights that should urge us to reconsider not only the way we consume, but also the way designer and brands create. So, Marisa, can you give us some insight on how we actually consume and how fast fashion has redefined our relation to the garments?
We consume too much, definitely. So just to give you a number, we have doubled the production of clothing, footwear and accessories, since the year 2000. So in the last 23 years, we've doubled the production. And we haven't doubled the number of people we are in the planet. So clearly we're buying a lot more. And then also there's some countries that are consuming more than they used to consume in the past. What is really relevant is the fast fashion is growing very fast. There's an average of these companies growing at 20% year on year, which is really, it's a very, very high growth. And even though there's more products, we're buying more, we're still getting rid of our clothes, like an average of 11 kilos a year, all of us, of product that we've bought and we don't use. There's a crazy influence of social media on consumption. There's a research from Global Web Index saying that around 49% of people between 16 and 64, so basically everybody, are buying from the influence of the influencers and social media. So that's really creating additional consumption. We have to say, ladies, we buy more than our fellow friends men. We buy 3 times more than they do. And there's an average of 35% of women buy every month. They buy new things every month. There's good news, though. It looks like around 71% in one research from McKinsey says that people are willing to pay more for sustainable clothing. I'm a little bit skeptical, if I'm honest, about this, because one thing is what we say, the other thing is what we do. And then how much are we willing to pay? But at least this is happening. There's new business models coming out in the market, like rental and secondhand, which is fantastic, because what they're doing really is avoiding the usage of new natural resources. And then there's a trend of going back to artisanal, local product, which is really good because it's helping us to get closer to home. But let me give you another, the final point on fast fashion. Fast fashion is changing dramatically the way we think about fashion, and definitely new generations. There's this disposable mentality, like you can just buy something, wear it 3 times, and then throw it away. Remember what I said before about water on t-shirt, but it's on everything. Also, what is happening is lowering the quality of products, because the companies of fast fashion, to reach to a certain price, they lower the quality of the materials because they're very cost efficient or cost focused. And then it's the vicious circle, because the products are lower quality, they last you least, and then you have to go and buy new clothes. So this whole nonsense of this circle of buying, using, throwing away, I need more news and buy again, is creating really a very disturbing situation of fast fashion. I want to mention that this is clearly shown, fashion is one industry, but it's shown on the Overshot Day. May I just have hands up of who knows what Overshot Day is? Thank you. Well, Overshot Day is the day that we have basically consumed the natural resources that the earth has in 1 year. In the 70s, we basically used the natural resources during the year. So at the end of the year, we basically consume the earth resources. This year, supposedly, is going to be the 28th of July. Last year was the 4th of August. So if we just take that in a year, we've lost 1 week. I mean, basically what is happening is we need 1.6, 1.7 Earths to take care of ourselves. It's like your fridge. How long does it take your fridge to be empty, right? So 1.6 Earths. If we keep having this rate of 1 week less every year, in 30 years, in January, we will not have anything to consume. So clearly we're over-consuming. So my last point is when we talk about sustainability, which is a word that is helped a lot moving forward, but I want to say strongly that in fashion, being sustainable is not good anymore, because that means we're leaving the planet as we found it, and we're already negative. So we as an industry and consumers, we need to find a way to have that positive impact on what we do.
We understand that fast fashion is a serious threat for the environment, but it is also jeopardizing social justice and economic justice. Just what kind of tool do we have to block them?
Now, this is something for the people who are from France to be very proud of. Anyone I've met from France is normally already quite proud of who they are in their country. So now you have another thing to add, because last week the French government voted unanimously on a bill to really halt ultra and fast fashion. And when we talk about ultra, we're talking about the likes of Shein and Temu. They're coming out of kind of parts of Asia, very, very low quality, low cost garments, and not just garments, products as well. And so the French, yay, the French, said, no, okay, this is done. By 2030, the penalties for an individual garment coming in are going to be 10 euros. Now, the garments themselves are 1, 2, 3 euros, as I mentioned, so that is a fantastic penalty. And then the other thing they voted on was to ban advertising, which, as you mentioned, is an incredibly powerful tool that these businesses use to drive their products. In fact, that's what they claim that's the reason they're sustainable, is because they're direct to consumer. So, you know, when you're scrolling on Instagram or on TikTok, I'm not on TikTok, but if I was, I would see so many ads for Shein, Temu, kind of really promoting, trying to take over Amazon, and that's going to be banned, which really, truly, us in the industry, we're practically jumping up and down in our offices. Like, this is a fantastic step, which kind of leads me on to, you know, what you were saying. One of the big tools to stop fast fashion and these kind of big, powerhouse models, it's only regulation. Because what has been proved is that the industry of fashion cannot self-regulate. A lot of industries, to be honest, can't self-regulate when it comes to sustainability, but at least other industries, like energy, are saying, well, actually, potentially is a better investment in renewables. We're going to kind of go down that route because it's a bit of a long-term gain. For fast fashion, it has not been able to self-regulate at all. So regulation is really, really key. And I know later on we're going to discuss about some of the reasons you have to get regulation right and how actually sometimes it can be counterproductive. But when it comes to fast fashion, I'm all for regulation stopping cheap, low-quality garments coming into Europe, coming into America, coming into the UK. So that is a big tool that I'm excited about.
And Runa, you as a designer, so what should be the green light to follow when creating a collection or a garment?
For me, as a designer, I think it's very important to go to the source, to kind of control what you're actually making from fiber to the final product, like I said earlier. And I'm glad, Marissa, you touched upon water, because water is a huge resource. And it's something which I read that the WWF put out saying that in the future, 40% of the population is not going to have access to fresh water, which is very, very disturbing. But the fashion industry, we do understand that the consumption has doubled. We have legislations put in place. But I come across students from developing countries coming and speaking to me and saying, you know what, you've had your fun. You've enjoyed the fashion. Why can't we do that? We don't have the money to afford it, but we're still going to go and buy what's available. So how can you put those laws on us? We can't afford sustainable fashion. So what can we do as designers? As designers, we can try to find creative solutions to the problems that actually exist. Now, if we're talking about prints and dyeing that is going to be highly water intensive, is there a way that we could go back in time, revive ancient indigenous techniques, and then bring it out? Like I said, fashion is highly fragmented. You being one of my models right now, if you don't mind standing up. So Nadej is wearing a cape that was actually printed using seaweed as a coagulant. Now, using seaweed as a coagulant, we printed 250 meters of fabric using just 50 gallons of water, which is incredible. Each and every design gets to be unique. You have the inks that are splashed on the surface. You can drop on it, you put the fabric, you pull it out, and you get prints that are organic, beautiful, and different. And at the same time, it caters to the fashion industry. It is creative, and you're not wasting water, which is one of the most important resources. So talking about the green line that designers need to keep in mind, you got to keep in mind the circularity, and there's a reason you're a designer, there's a reason you're being creative. You fashion something, and that's exactly what fashion is. You are creating something, and I think that's the green line.
I have the feeling that it's quite an art task also to know what's behind a garment. So how can we get the full story behind the clothes we buy? Georgia Ray, how can we improve the transparency so that we can buy in consciousness?
Greenwashing, my favorite topic of conversation. There's greenwashing, there's green hushing. This is kind of my day-to-day. Brands come to us at EcoAge, and really what they're saying is help us along the sustainability journey, but also help us tell this story credibly, help us tell it in a compelling way. So I'm super excited that this is a topic today. So greenwashing is really the falsifying or overstating of a green credential within a product or a business or a service. And I think when you think greenwashing, I can imagine a lot of you here are thinking about the kind of lies that are being told by maybe petroleum companies around their reduction to carbon emissions, things like that, like just out and out lying. And that is greenwashing. But for me, what I'm seeing come across my desk recently is greenwashing, which is a bit more nuanced. And I think that's even worse. Because in a way, we can, there's enough kind of public conversation around the lies businesses tell, but there's not enough conversation around the ways that marketers or comms people kind of portray certain elements, maybe fluff up language to portray a certain type of progress. And that's quite scary, because if you see in a shop and a garment that's saying, this is made with recycled content, and it's got a premium attached to it. But if you're feeling a little bit, you want to take responsibility, you want to buy something more consciously, that's all you have to go off. And you're like, okay, cool. So this business, is taking responsibility. This product is a little bit more conscious. I'm going to invest in this product. And you go away happy, skipping out of the shop, thinking you're kind of doing your bit for the world, right? They're lying, basically. What's happening is overclaiming. So, and it used to be, it's tightening up, but a garment only had to have 1%, 2%, 3% of recycled content for a label to be able to say, this is made of recycled content. So it's so misleading to consumers. And I think this is why, just from a personal perspective, you just feel really frustrated and you feel really helpless. Because fashion is a great way to kind of start on your kind of eco journey. You can be like, okay, look at my wardrobe. I want to make some changes here. I'm going to reduce single-use plastic, but I'm also going to look at what I'm wearing, make sure I don't buy too much and buy better. And I saw a few nods, and I feel like this is probably a good audience. But people who are like, yeah, I want to be better and contribute. And then if you're being lied to on a label, I mean, what can you do, right? And so that's where regulation is really important, and there's a lot of regulation around green claims and making sure that brands substantiate anything they're saying. Biodegradable, carbon neutral, these kind of things that you might see around need to be backed up by really test it and make sure they're credible. But what I'm trying to help brands with at the moment is reducing that over-claiming. Be honest. I'm trying to tell my clients, they'll come and they'll be like, we've got this amazing product, and it's super exciting, it's made of regenerative cotton, and we want to say it's the world's best, greatest, most amazing t-shirt. And I'm like, okay, maybe that's not the right route. Why don't we just tell people that you have made it from regenerative cotton, and then you can put a little QR code, and maybe people can hear the story of the farmer. Why don't we be honest and just stop inflating? Because I think as a consumer, that's what we would want. If we're going to purchase, we want to be told the truth, and we're sick of it being fluffy. So that's really kind of my TED Talk spiel. You can see I get really passionate about this topic because I think it's important from a consumer perspective that we are actually told things that are true, that we're told stories, that there's no fluff. The lies, yeah, they need to sort that out, but I don't want a kind of half lie. I want the truth.
So we all agree business as usual can be no longer the norm. On which principle and value should brands and design base their transformation?
I think Runa said it really well. I think she started from the beginning on the life cycle. We can really see how design can be beautiful and responsible. But I think the design is not only on the product, which I think, as I said, I'm not going to repeat what Runa just said, but I think it's about everything else around. How many labels do we need? How many hand tags do we need? What's going to happen when somebody doesn't want this product? So I think from that principle of end of life at the beginning of the life of the product, that's important. And when it comes to principles as brands, I think it's the way we communicate. So I will just say transparency and just making sure that we are also using fashion to help people understand the impact they have. Because sometimes we buy and we don't know that we are maybe not having the right choice because we don't have the information. So I think it's up to the brands to use our products to tell the story.
And for me, echoing on what you said about greenwashing, and of course transparency, there's a classic case. I'm not going to mention the brand, but I'm sure everybody knows. It's where they put it out, they said, you can come and buy your t-shirts, we're going to recycle it, make it into new yarn. Now at COP27, I got to meet this group and I got to ask them the question. I was like, you are putting these claims out for people to come and buy clothes because they're like, oh, you know what, I can come and buy them because if I drop them, it's going to be recycled into new textile, which could be made again into new fabric. But is your unit existent? Oh, we're still developing the process. I said, I understand that. We're discussing this at COP, but does the consumer know that? Now that's greenwashing. That's like the classic case of greenwashing. And unfortunately, the recycling unit has shut down because of, it's a pity, but there was no investment that kind of went in. The consumers found the fabric too expensive. And at the same time, logistics. They were basically based in a certain location, but they were getting all the scrap material from Asia and Africa. And now the warehouse is full of customer take-backs, which has not been recycled. So yes, transparency is number one. And I think another very important fact for me is what the World Bank is coming up with. It's called the locally led adaptations, where they're kind of empowering communities to take control of what is happening within their system. So rather than going and buying something that is mass-made or even mill-produced, what is it that the community within themselves could work towards producing and being economically viable? And this is something that came up during the pandemic when they realized that everyone had to live together and come up with solutions for their community. So I think that could go a long way because it could be a shift from what the US is thinking and a shift from what Europe is thinking, but we're going to go back to the base and restart, and I think, yeah, that could be the way.
I'd love to just add on to that. A great NGO called Changing Markets. They've got fantastic reports on everything to do with fashion, pollution, and plastic. So definitely check them out. They haven't paid me. I just love them. They put an Apple tag tracker in a t-shirt and dropped it into a bin at a brand that we will not name, and they followed it. It was so fascinating. It was like gamified advocacy, and we were like watching this garment go all around the world, supposedly being turned into a new fiber, and it just ended up in another market in Ghana. The UK sends about 15 million kind of containers of clothing every week to a market in Ghana. 15 million. Isn't that just, it's beyond comprehension, right? Because so it was really fascinating to watch this. So if you ever wanted to kind of hoodwink fashion, put an Apple tag onto a garment, drop it into a brand, and see where it goes around the world, because it is incredibly fascinating to watch the distance and the carbon emissions that this garment travels around the world, supposedly for circularity, supposedly being saved, supposedly for a better planet.
Runa, you say often ocean has always been our ally, and it's time we reciprocate. So how can we do so in the fashion space?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Great question, and I love this question. So, like I've been speaking about the fact that fashion is taking up space on land. It's competing with food. We, unfortunately, will start looking at the oceans for food if it's done in a sustainable way, especially like we're talking about seaweed helping, prevent world hunger and sustainable fisheries. But when it comes to fashion, I have noticed that there's a lot of algae blooms that happen around coasts. Most of it is because of human activity and pesticides and everything that's released because of the nitrogen buildup. These algae blooms take over the entire coast. There's nothing you can do for months. Even the birds find it difficult to wade, through the oceans, and it kills the crustaceans. It has its own habit that happens every year. It comes around summer, it hangs around for 6 months, and then it's gone. So you could do one thing. You could tell your farmers, stop using pesticides, but when is that going to happen? Or you could put out laws that say, we got to make sure that we do not have so much of waste that's entering the ocean. But is there a way that we could use what's happening as a byproduct, which is of our unfortunate waste, into something that's positive? So there's a dress that you would see right there in the corner that's made out of the algae blooms, and that's the pure algae bloom itself. So what we're doing is we're taking the algae blooms, we're harvesting it, and we are converting it into paper and into algae leather, which could be repurposed, brought back into the fashion industry. It eliminates the use of plastic and also the cutting of virgin trees when it comes to paper. You use the textile waste from the garment industries as additional cellulose if required, and sometimes the leather dust that is generated from the leather industry to make it into a more plausible form of algae leather. So this is what we're doing in the fashion industry, and something that my organization does, trying to find creative ways for invasive species that are detrimental to the oceans.
Marisa, for you, innovation and circularity are also the two tools for fashion to better protect the ocean?
Absolutely, I think it's the way to go. But I think we cannot keep thinking about circular economy and innovation on materials and keep driving the same business models. So if we imagine fast fashion doing circular economy, which they don't, but imagine that with beautiful algae bloom, then we still wouldn't have enough resources. So I think it's important to challenge ourselves in how the business has to be driven, how many collections we need to drive, how do we buy less and better, and how do we create that innovation?
Georgie, how do we push, how do we drive the systemic change with the entire value chain of the brand?
So the problems we face are systemic. Therefore, the solutions need to also be systemic. And by that, I mean connected. We've talked about food, we've talked about the ocean, we've talked about fashion, we've talked about fibers, we've talked about marketing. You can see how it's not just a one-dimensional kind of problem. It really does stretch across the whole value chain. I think when a business comes to us at EcoAge, or any agency really, and they go, we really want to start on the sustainability journey, and we don't really know what to do. The first thing we do is we look at their business from a completely holistic sustainability perspective. So a lot of kind of conversation around sustainability in the last, say, 20 years has been focused on environmental. It has been focused on carbon emissions, kind of energy. But the tools we use to assess businesses, there's 23 different sustainability topics. And that goes from renewable energy to people within supply chains, to health and well-being and mental wellness, all the way down to, are you paying your tax as a company? What are you lobbying against? That actually comes under the remit of kind of what I assess. It's a new world for me, the tax world. I'm getting into it and getting used to it. But it's interesting, isn't it? Because when you think sustainability, you probably think environmental, or you think kind of individual product. What we are trying to do with businesses, brands, even products, is really look at the full holistic picture and say the impacts you think you're having here have flow-on effects down to here. When it comes to comms, kind of linking it back to greenwashing, is that greenwashing does occur when a business doesn't have that holistic approach to sustainability. So you'll see, as we're all consumers, citizens, brands will come out with activations, a certain partnership or something around a particular part of the life cycle. And you're kind of like, where did this come from? Like, I've never heard you as a brand talk about sustainability. You might go onto their website and you see nothing else about sustainability, nothing about how they're looking after people. It's just this kind of one-off, almost philanthropic approach to sustainability. So what we're trying to do is say, look, let's build this from a strong foundation. Then you can put the roof on top of that foundation, and that can be your creative comms, where you story tell, where you get consumers engaged. But let's get that foundation right, which, going back to your question, looks at the full life cycle of a product.
And if I ask you to share with us one or two innovations you feel that are really game-changing?
In terms of innovation, yes, there could be a lot, but coming back to recycling or trying to create new products with the existing textile waste, that is something that could be really, really innovative. But we need to also take into consideration how important your process is. Is it going to be environmentally damaging? What is it that because you could say that you're creating something which is an innovative textile, and people are going to be like, wow, that's really cool. But what goes into it? Are you bleaching it? Are you using harmful chemicals to kind of process that yarn? Are you spinning it in a certain way that is, not right? What is your, how important are the logistics when it comes into consideration? So we need to take that really take that into consideration. The other thing, apart from the legislation that you spoke about, which France has done, when it comes to fast fashion, and also they're giving out money for people who can mend their clothes, which is great. What I struggle with is what happens to the unsold inventory of these luxury brands. Like Kering just came out. I could be wrong with the number, but it's like 1 billion something of unsold inventory. Now, what happens to those? We've been hearing about those products being burnt because they do not want it to be counterfeited, or they do not want it to end up in the second-hand market. But we never get to see what happens to it. So what happens to that? And if you're talking fast fashion, yes, it is hugely damaging to the environment because it's mass. But then you have a small niche, which is also extremely expensive. But when you weigh the scales, you got to be really careful as to what you're dealing with. So if we also had legislation that dealt with the luxury segment, I think we're going to kind of move the needle in the right way.
I think it's a really good point, and that's why now, as of this year, I believe we're going to have to be, the brands will have to be responsible of their waste, because it's a key issue to really understand. When we're buying with so much time in advance, with the pressure of growing 20%, like I was saying before, if the brands have to grow 20%, then the management team is pushed to buy a lot of product that they don't even know they're going to sell, and that product ends up in landfills at the end.
So my father was a brewer. So that was fun, being a teenager and having a father who was a brewer. But he worked in 30 years in supply chain in New Zealand and Australia. And he went on to kind of build a sustainable craft brewery, which was a lot of fun. I got to spend. That was how I kind of started in sustainability. And as we'd have discussions over the dinner table with our beer, "Whoa, Simon, having a great time," he always said, well, in a way, we were kind of doing sustainability for a long time, because we've always been trying to reduce the amount of glass in the bottle to save money. But actually, reducing the glass as much as we can, or finding better, cheaper solutions that were just as good, like aluminium and cans, we were just doing it from a financial sustainability perspective. And I tell this story because I think it's quite a good flip on sustainability to actually, and innovation actually, because in a way, what we're asking business leaders and brands to do is just start to look at the forces, the risks and the opportunities, which you should be doing if you're a business leader. You should be saying, you know, this is a risk to my business, how can I mitigate that? And start to view it in a slightly different angle and maybe flip some of the things you've already been doing from an economic point, but look at some of the other kind of positive impacts to environment or society. And I think for me, when it comes to innovation, I'd like to see that kind of flip in a CEO mindset, that flip in an executive or any kind of leader within a company, or any kind of person within a company, just that mindset that goes, could we look at things differently? Could we challenge? Could we innovate? Could we be more creative? And I'm excited. I think that's starting to happen in the new wave of kind of purpose-led businesses like yourself, Oceanborn, like yourself. We're seeing a lot of that, but I'd love to see that kind of scaled up. And that's kind of a maybe different perspective on innovation, but for me, that's one of the kind of big levers of change.
At the foundation, we usually promote a collaborative approach because we all agree we won't win this battle alone, so we need to act collectively. Do you think that it's really important to create those synergies also within the fashion industry?
Absolutely. Full stop. Yes.
It was short.
Yeah, it was very short. No, I really believe this is not a competition. This is about, first of all, the big ones should be leading. They are the ones that have the R&D budgets. They are the ones that have the power. So there's big coalitions of the majority of the fashion industry, and they should be the one driving. So I always say, if the big ones will change and fund the right materials, the right printing, the no plastic packaging, the whole industry could go afterwards. So I think it's getting the collective action of the right stakeholders for sure.
I definitely believe that collaborations are the way to go forward. In fact, in my book, I've written about fashion and agriculture, because if designers, to give you a very simple example, if designers could collaborate with like cotton farmers, go to the source, work with them, see how the fiber is being made, utilize, for example, indigo plants to get your dyes from, that creates nitrogen fixing, so you have the soil fertility. I do not know much about it, but this is what I have gathered working with soil scientists. And if we could get that fiber, work with weavers where you could create your own fabric, then you're owning the whole process, and then you can even take control of the printing or the dyeing. So collaborations are really important. But for collaborations, Nadej, you need education. And this sort of education needs to start in design schools. It's imperative. I mean, you can't just go ahead and say, I'm going to be a fashion designer without understanding why you are there to fashion something. So when you have education that starts in schools, where people wouldn't come to me and tell me, oh, sustainability, that's going to exist anyways, but not knowing what the true term is to be sustainable, I think, yeah, it starts from basically educating students, educating consumers, and at the same time, when we have the pioneers who want to be sustainable, you can actually go to your mill who's making your fabric and say, I would like to see this happen. But if you don't have that education, you don't have the questions to ask. And if you don't have the questions to ask, then you're not going to go anywhere. You're just going to accept what they give you and say, yes, you're right, it's sustainable, I love it. It's made of seaweed, perfect.
Yeah, not to sound like a broken record, but yes, collaboration is key. One of the initiatives that EcoAge does is something called the Green Carpet Fashion Awards. It's in LA. It actually used to be in Milan, but then we thought we're going to pop it in the middle of awards season, so it's just before the Oscars. And the whole point of it is to create kind of intersection between climate activists, brands, celebrities, foundations, NGOs, bring them together and celebrate environmental justice, social justice, and really tell incredible stories. And it's been incredible. Last year we had Leonardo DiCaprio. This year we had Zendaya, which was very exciting. I love her. And we had Donatella Versace. It was really incredible. And I've always been a bit skeptical. Maybe it's my New Zealand upbringing, but I'm not. I'm like, oh yeah, celebrities, cool. But the power of those people, if they were telling different stories in their kind of platforms, and we could use those, it would be incredibly influential. So the idea is to really harness the power of talent, celebrities, combine them with NGOs, amazing designers, to elevate the more authentic stories of communities. So yeah, if anyone wants to come along next year, let me know. It's in LA. But I mean, that is really an example of collaboration on quite a different level than we've seen in the fashion industry before. The fashion industry has always just been like New York Fashion Week and London Fashion Week and these glamorous events where everyone's drinking champagne and wearing dark glasses inside, which I never quite understood. But those are the type of new collaborations I think we're seeing, and I hope that we can only create more and more and more of those.
So, of course, being collaborative means also being inclusive and integrate communities, and especially coastal communities, into the equation. Before we explore the way how fashion can empower and uplift coastal communities, I would like to share a little video that you made, Runa, about Indian women collecting seaweed. Perhaps before we see the movie, can you tell us a little about why you decided to do it?
Okay, I'm going to be very brief with this. So when I started doing the seaweed prints, I did what everyone always does. So I decided to go to the store and buy the powdered seaweed. And as time went by, and I was like, why am I doing this? Because it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit with my principles and my ethos of being a fashion environmentalist and a sustainable designer. So I said I was going to go and find out how this was actually made, and find the challenges that were faced by the people who make this product, and how large brands and middlemen are taking away their resources, and what is it that they really struggle with. So when I met these printed garments, I decided to go to the source, and I was fortunate enough to come across these women divers who basically dive for seaweed, indigenous seaweed, which you don't get because of bottom trawling and because of overfishing. But they still rely upon it as a source of income, while the men folk go deep into the oceans to kind of get the fish. They stay there for like 2 to 3 weeks, and these women have this alternative income. So I decided to go visit them, learn about their process of collecting seaweed, and at the same time taught them how to print like this onto paper, and then it gave them another income because they were working with the paper industry.
So let's see the movie.
In my world, the intersection of fashion and environmentalism is a place of endless exploration and discovery. My passion for sustainable fashion has always driven me to seek new solutions, especially when it comes to mitigating water wastage and pollution. My latest endeavor was to use seaweed as a printing technique, but to truly grasp the process, I knew I had to go to the source. My journey to connect fashion with our planet led me to a remote coastal town in South India. The story begins in this quaint coastal town, where the waves gently kiss the verdant shoreline. Little did I know, this place held more than just a technique. It held a community deeply intertwined with the sea. As I ventured further into the lives of the locals, I stumbled upon an extraordinary group known as the seaweed mermaids. These remarkable women were the stewards of the sea, harvesting seaweed using techniques passed down through generations. In the past, we enjoyed abundant seaweed harvests. However, over time, these stocks have significantly depleted. Initially, there were only a few individuals harvesting this indigenous seaweed. But now, due to increased demand or interest, several people have taken up seaweed harvesting. This surge in harvesting activity is having a expressed curiosity about the attire these women wear while harvesting seaweed, I received insights into their choice of clothing. Proper attire is crucial for this task, and while various nonprofit organizations have generously provided specialized gear for seaweed harvesting, many of these women opt for t-shirts and shorts that originally belonged to the men in their community. They have expressed a preference for this clothing, finding it more comfortable and suitable for their work in the ocean. Despite the availability of donated gear, they choose what works best for their natural environment. The day has finally come, and Gita, Amma, and I embark on a journey to a remote Indian Ocean coastline. As they prepare, Gita and Amma carefully wrap their fingers to prevent bleeding while harvesting seed. Gita takes the initiative to demonstrate the process to me. And with a graceful dive, she immerses herself in the waters. Watching the entire process unfold is truly fascinating. This hidden treasure grows on the rocky seabed. The seaweed must be delicately plucked and collected in bags that the women carry behind them as they work. Following the successful seed harvest, the women make their way out of the ocean, their bags filled with the precious bounty of seed. As they walk along the coastline, they encounter other seaweed harvesters who are also engaged in this labor-intensive activity. Additionally, they are joined by fellow women from the seed community who are preparing to embark on their own diving expeditions, continuing the tradition of livelihood that revolves around these pristine waters. This journey has been a profound experience that has compelled me to contemplate the essence of sustainable fashion. It has revealed that sustainability transcends the mere choice of materials and techniques. Instead, it encompasses the intricate web of lives and ecosystems that enable fashion to exist. It's about the people who labor with dedication, the communities that rely on these practices for their livelihoods, and the environment that provides the resources. Sustainable fashion, at its core, is a holistic commitment to harmonizing these elements, ensuring that fashion industry's impact is not only beautiful, but also responsible and beneficial to all.
Marisa Georgia Ray, how do you think a brand can give back to communities?
Exactly what Runa has shown, which is actually going there and making sure that, the governments and the brands are really, respecting it. One of the things that I thought about the video is that when they're saying there's more demand on seaweed now, and it is decreasing the availability of it. So what's the responsibility of the government right now, legislation, to make sure that this community don't lose this amazing opportunity they have?
Yeah, thank you for that. We didn't need to be up here. We could have shown that video and all gone early. It really summarizes such the incredible power of fashion to create incredible good in the communities. But to bring it to one serious note, I think the best thing brands could do is pay the workers. One of the saddest stories I think I've probably ever heard in my life was a union worker in Bangladesh last year in June was brutally murdered outside the factory just after he had successfully got the wages and the bonuses that were owed to the workers through a meeting. So it was literally handshake, yes, we'll give you the wages, taken outside and murdered. He was the sole bread winner for the family. His wife had cancer, and he leaves behind 2 children. So not only is that devastating for the family, but it also sets the precedent within those communities of when you speak up and ask for what is rightfully yours, you're going to face consequences. So brands, what we're really encouraging at the moment is to really take responsibility, because they offshore it. They think, no, that's not my community. I don't have any impact there. But if the brands weren't consistently squeezing the margins and they were actually demanding that the workers could unionize, that they weren't going to be murdered, it would be an incredibly different story for those communities. So yeah, let's keep people like that in our thoughts as we wear our garments, because they're the ones who do suffer the real consequences of our actions.
So, I would like to ask you about the Make the Label Count strategy and come to the legislation side of fashion. What's still missing in the measure of legislation, and why did you decide to launch this campaign?
Yeah, so Make the Label Count is basically a coalition. I will keep this brief because there's pages and pages of it online if you want to check it out. But it's basically a coalition, mostly of natural fiber producers, who were really trying to have conversation at an EU Commission level, saying, you've got really great aims around green claims, but the methodologies you're applying to say you need to substantiate are kind of more on the side of synthetic fibers, and cotton, wool, we're not going to be ranked as highly within that kind of methodology. So obviously that's quite detrimental. It wasn't an even playing field. Natural fibers like wool and cotton, they have their own impacts, but we need to create an even playing field so that consumers, us, don't go in and are told that this nylon garment is better than a wool-based garment. They have different impacts. So it was really about that. And I think it showed we actually were quite successful in the coalition in getting to engage with EU Commission MEPs and getting them to reconsider and expand the methodology to include microplastics, circularity, and just plastics in general. So it was really a successful kind of campaign, but it's one that is still ongoing. So yeah, check it out on the website, Make the Label Count, because we do really need to make the labels count from our consumer perspective, right?
So before we open the floor for questions, ladies, can you share with us one of your inspiration for motivation?
Yes, okay. Well, to me, I mean, I love always Gandhi, and to me the key one is you must be the change that you want to see in the world. And I mean, we've talked a lot about how governments have to be responsible, how the brands have to do their job, but all of us are consumers when we leave this room, right? We all make a decision all the time. And I think we cannot wait for brands to fix the issue. I think every time we buy something, it's our decision and we support that brand. So let's make those decisions, even though sometimes it's inconvenient because you may not have to, you kind of maybe buy the one that you were using before, but definitely be the change that you want the world to be. Thank you.
I realize there are a lot of challenges when it comes to sustainable fashion, but I think awareness, like what the foundation is doing, is extremely important. And it's only this way that people will understand what happens behind making of garments or the clothes or, the detrimental side of fast fashion. And while we are working towards sustainability in fashion being more affordable, in the sense where we do not want it to be mass, where it's again going to cause another ripple effect which is negative. So I found this really nice quote, forgive my French accent, but I'm going to try saying this. It says, les grands ne sont grands parce que nous sommes genoux, levons-nous. So it basically says, Nadej, if you would be better in translating the actual meaning of it.
Les grands ne sont grands que parce que nous sommes à genoux, levons-nous.
Yeah, but can you, in English.
Yeah, it's mean that the tools are only told because we are on our knees, so we need to raise.
Yeah.
It's lovely.
And I think for me, inspiration, to be cliche, is the ocean. Growing up in New Zealand, I was surrounded by the sea, and the sea has always been there for me, rhyming, through my toughest of times, through grief, through love, through hope. A stroll on the beach has always been a source of inspiration. So when I think about leaving a positive legacy, about the choices I make on a day-to-day basis, about helping brands, I kind of turn to the sea, I turn to nature, and I just go, you've always been there for me. It's my turn to be there for it. So yeah, I think you can get a lot of inspiration from stepping outside, looking around, breathing it in, and then taking a positive step forward.
So it's time to wrap up. What are the key takeaways you would like our audience to go back with?
For me, it's the 3 C's. I would always say it's curiosity. You need to be curious about life. You need to be curious as to why you exist and what's the reason that you've been brought onto this planet. It's only then when curiosity drives you to be compassionate, which creates solutions. And when you create solutions, my last C that I would like to say is for us not to be competitive, but to be creative. So that's all I would like to leave this discussion with.
That fashion is an incredible way for you to make an individual difference. When the problems feel big in climate change and biodiversity crisis and plastic crisis, turn to your individual actions, and your fashion, the choices you make, the brands you choose to buy from is a really, really great way to start making.
Or engage. Just really engage with people around you, with your own businesses, drive the change that is needed, and engage with yourself on making the right decisions when you go and decide which brand you want to buy. Thank you very much.
So I think we have time for 1 or 2 questions if you have. I can come and give you the mic.
Hi, everyone. So we spoke about shifting from fast to slow fashion. Do you have like a strategy of how you would use the mindset to green shift value from fast to slow fashion? How will slow fashion create value for the user, for the consumer?
I'll try this. Yeah. I think the value for the consumer is the same with slow fashion. You still have enough brands out there and enough collections to actually be able to buy things every day. So the difference will be that the brands out there will not be creating, producing, and distributing continuous stock. There's one brand, Shein, for example, they're actually producing 1,000 styles a day. Who needs that a day? So to me, at the end, the added value for the consumer will be the same. They will still have a lot to buy from, but it's just you're going to make sure that you're buying from brands that are producing in a responsible way, and they're careful about the end of life of those products. I hope that answered.
Yeah, the question goes more like, how are we going to get them to consume better and less?
You mean people?
Yes.
Education. I think, and actually we have to start with ourselves. I'm learning every day on what is good and bad, and I think we need to spread the word. We need to give data. We need to tell people the impact that we have in every product that we buy. But I think we need to start from education from schools as well. I think nobody talks about this at schools. You were talking about the design school. Sustainability is one subject. The whole design college should be around sustainable education. But I think for me, education is key.
And I also think, it's nice to see you, Daniela. And I think it's also important to get the consumer to understand there's a form of integrity that comes from within when you buy a certain piece of garment. Like I was telling, we had dinner last night, and I was telling the 3 ladies here that when Sylvia Earle, when she spoke about the fact that we do not need to eat squid or octopus, but that's something that the whales need. I never knew about that. I mean, it's common sense, but I had no idea. But now I'm never I don't eat calamari, but even if it's offered, I'm going to refuse it. Because she was like, the whales are starving. We don't need it, but we are robbing them of their food. So if we can translate what we are discussing in very, very simple terms to a layperson, then the layperson, there is going to be, there's going to be a light that strikes somewhere, and then that decision is made, and then you'd be like, okay, I'm going to be more responsibly, I'm going to consume more responsibly, because even on flight, you see a lot of people coming with their refillable bottles. Before it was never there. People would still have, buy the water that you could probably get at the airport. So it is a change, it's taking place, but I think we need to create a lot more of this kind of awareness campaigns.
I also think that we've been told that the only way to be satisfied is to purchase new. We are consumers. I mean, how many times have we see consumers. We're citizens, we're people, we're not consumers. So the slow fashion conversation, I think, is more than just purchasing better brands. It's also about viewing engagement with fashion differently. Shopping your own wardrobe. That's my latest thing, because I do love shopping, I have to say. So I'm like, okay, I'm shopping my own wardrobe today. Renting, hiring. We've done an EcoAge, a clothes swap, because we all love fashion. That's why we work in fashion sustainability. So everyone brings their clothes in, and we're like, okay, you have that piece for a couple of weeks, trade it. It creates different kind of, instead of a one-dimensional buy, and therefore buy better, it's also buy different.
Yeah, that goes, and then I give the microphone, so sorry. I love how you said fashionalization, or you made a verb out of fashion design. I think we can all be our own fashion designers. So the role of the brand is just to produce it for us. So you're kind of like going against vertical integration in a way. You're engaging the customer as not only a customer. And that's where it would be good to see how we're going to do that. Anyways, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you for these very inspiring talks. I just wanted maybe to have a bit more of your perspective, and also going back on what Marisa said earlier. Have you noticed a real change in mentality regarding the consumers? Or this is something we still need to do, because we discussed a lot about the brands, maybe a bit about governments, and also mentioning this new law. For example, it will punish consumers at the end, because the fee that will be added wouldn't impact the brands, but the consumers at the end. So do you still, do you believe it's fair? Do you believe it's the right way? Or should we consider something else? Thank you.
I'll answer the first part, and then I'll let you do the second one. I mean, definitely I've seen change around, around my environment. But to be honest, we're so far away. I think everybody's talking about buying less, but very few people actually buy less. Last night I was having dinner, and actually it was before the dinner, and I was talking with Aureline, and she said to me that she has an 8-year-old daughter, and they've done this challenge of not buying anything new this year. They're just going to rent. It's the first time I hear somebody put in that challenge. So I think it's a long way to go, but I'm optimistic because at least people are talking about it, and I think we're kind of inspiring ourselves. And it's going to take time. And I think it's probably going to take 2 generations, to be honest, because mine is too old now to change completely, but at least some people are being aware.
Yeah, I think one of the things I remember as a child was that my parents would take me in the summer, and then in the winter, we lived in the country, into the big city of New Zealand, which is like 20,000 people. And it would be like, we're buying you 5 things that you're going to wear this winter, and then you're going to have 5 things that you wear this summer, because you're going to grow out of it by the next time. We didn't have internet. We really didn't. We didn't have social media. So I, as a 11-year-old, was like, cool, that's the way I get clothes. That's the only way. Like, my mum takes me in, we get it twice a year. Whereas now we've got this incredible social media marketing power hold over these really influential young children. And so they're seeing that I need to have that. And also, if they have the credit card logged in, like some of you might have experienced this with your children, they are buying and packages are turning up at the house. And it's like, why are you consuming all this clothing? So it's an incredibly different mindset between the generations, across all of the generations, from 20 years ago to 30 years ago to now. And I think it's incredibly sociological, complex question, but I really think that legislation that looks at penalizing the brands, the really, really bad brands, and then a change in the ability of access that children particularly have, because everyone's like, Gen Z is going to save the world, like they are the ones buying the Shein hauls, unfortunately. So if we can, it's hard, isn't it? If we can start to shift that and stop the access, and I think that's why in the thing I'm most interested in the France bill is the advertising, because that is incredibly powerful. So I really hope we'll see a shift in that, so that consumers, the ones who actually can't afford to buy at higher price points, still have the access to the clothes that they need, but the ones who are buying 20 new garments a week cannot.
So it's time now we close the session. I would like to thank you deeply for your commitment and for being with us today. I would like to thank you for being with us also. And I hope that you will have found all these discussions really instructive. And I strongly believe that fashion is really the sector where we can have the much power as an individual. So when we don't start, we don't know how to start acting and committing for environment, I think that fashion and buying less is really one of the most simple acts we can have. Thank you so much. Thank you.